An eyeball covered by a red no sign spins into view. White text on a black background reads, Mason in the dark. A blind man's journey through the wacky world of reading, writing, and other silly bollocks. Brought to you from beyond the black screen. Cut to black. Hello everyone. Mason here. How you doing? You know what? I reckon it's about time I did the Authortube Newbie Tag, but I've compiled my own set of questions because, and I haven't had a chance to say this in a long time, so I'm gonna enjoy it. I do what I want. If you're new here and you've got no idea who I am, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mason Adey, aka Mason in the Dark. I'm a completely blind YouTuber, author and voice actor from Staffordshire, England. Accessibility is incredibly important to me, so all my videos feature a black screen in order to give both blind and sighted people an equal experience. Right then, let's get to the questions, because that's what we're here for. Surprise! Hello Mason, it's me. I won't introduce myself because you know who I am, don't you? My question is, how long have you known you wanted to be an author, and when did you start taking it seriously? I won't ask every question, but your voice is pretty boring, so I may occasionally interrupt to help. Hello, again. Listen fella, I'm pretty sure you've got me mixed up with another Mason. I'm Mason in the Dark, not Mason Dark. We're two completely different people, I promise. He's an obliviously stupid, overly egotistical radio DJ that hosts that Hello Mason show on TalkTube Radio. I'm just me. If you could stop sending me mail, I'd appreciate that. Anyway, yeah, the question. I think I've always wanted to be an author, in an abstract way at the very least. I just love passion and creativity. I'm easily influenced and inspired. Prose, poetry, lyrics, screenwriting, stand-up comedy. Over the years, as I've found various forms of entertainment, I've wanted to give them all a go. Although I always thought that it would be cool to be an author, other than a few vague attempts at writing a story which were inevitably condemned to the pits of deletion once writer's block got its claws into me and I gave up, it never really happened. I was born visually impaired, but I've been completely blind since 2017. Joining BookTube in 2020 was what reignited my love for reading, but it wasn't until August 2021 that I finished my debut short story, The View from the Fifth Floor. After that, I started putting effort into it. I was working hard and I was enjoying myself, but it wasn't until the latter half of last year that I started taking it properly seriously. Since then, it's been an obsession. Dylan Justice, celebrity private investigator here. Is there a specific genre that you write in, or do you cast a wide net? And is there anything you don't think you'll ever write? When it comes to writing, I've learned to never say never, because 2 years ago, the last thing I would have expected would have been to start writing dark fantasy, but so far that's exactly where I've thrived, and I love it. Honestly, the army of ideas never ceases its onslaught, so there's always some new concept swirling around in my brain, even if I don't do anything about it. I can't think of a genre that I would automatically give a hard no to writing, except for maybe historical fiction, but even then, that's mostly because I'm a perfectionist and there's too many rules. When it comes to history, you either get it right or wrong, and I don't like getting things wrong, because it makes my brain hurt. I like my stories to be grounded in some sort of reality, but I don't want strict constraints to work within. I think that's why, overall, I've stuck to writing dark fantasy so far. The Bleeding Ground is inspired by elements of the Industrial Revolution, but it's still a fictional world, and with Dishonored in Death, the city of Dagrock is a modernised urban metropolis. Even something silly like Average Steve's Big Day Off has a sci-fi twist to it. Honestly, it's just more comfortable that way. At the end of the day, they're my worlds, my rules, and I get to decide how they work. Nobody can tell me I'm wrong if I'm making it up. Alright, it's Edgar. Move aside, it's time for me to ask a question. From the beginning of your writing journey to now, how do you feel you've evolved? That one's kind of difficult to define because I'm still evolving on a day-to-day basis. I'm probably going to be better today than I was yesterday, and yesterday I was better than I was last week. The most profound evolution has probably been my confidence. I started this journey as a man who second-guessed himself constantly because I was scared that my writing wasn't going to be good enough or that the concepts I was coming up with were going to be too much for me. Now, when I sit down for a writing session, I have the faith that I can execute whatever idea I'm working on. At the beginning of this video, I described myself as a YouTuber, author and voice actor. 2021 Mason would not have done that because it would have felt like I was stroking my own ego or something. The last 21 months has been an eye-opening experience. He's blind and he said it was an eye-opening experience. By no means am I an expert, and yeah, I've still got loads to learn, but that's okay, and these days I know what I'm doing when it comes to my own writing. I've got the self-confidence to not dither and just do it. Oh, it's my turn. What I would like to know is, what do you wish you'd known when you first started out, and what advice would you give to newbies? You are probably too harsh. If you care about writing, if you really love it, then nobody's going to be as critical about your work as you are. Do it for yourself. Forget about the rest of the world. Write because you want to, because you enjoy it, because it makes you feel good. Write what you want to write because you would want to read it. I promise that if you do that and you stick at it, then eventually you'll come up with something that you're proud of, and at the end of the day, that's all that really matters.
Looking at the list, the next question is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Hey, that's not nice. You shouldn't have to say your weaknesses. You don't have any. You're a very special boy.
My biggest strength is probably character development and dialogue. Honestly, I just love sitting down to write characters having a conversation. I'm the kind of author who feels like my characters are real in some way, which is terrifying considering that Valdus Doyle is... well, you'll have to read The Bleeding Ground to find out. Seamless plug. My point is, even if it's only in my head, my characters have backstories, lives and personalities. They have hopes and dreams, they learn from their experiences, they evolve and change over time. At this point, I know them well enough to see a line of dialogue or a bit of narration and think, nah, that doesn't really suit them. Valdus is observant, exact and a bit pretentious, to be honest. Evander is a deep thinker and he's quite verbose. Amin is blunt and to the point. Exploring all the different aspects of the characters, working out what makes them tick and trying to make them feel tangible is what I find most fun and interesting about writing. As for the dialogue, I'm just a sucker for it. I love reading or watching a good stripped back scene where the only thing to focus on is the characters interacting. I'll take that over a chaotic action-packed scene any day. Maybe it's due to my blindness, maybe not, we'll never know. Okay, my biggest weaknesses. First off, world building. I'm working hard on it and I am getting better, but I still find it easier to flesh out the micro than the macro. As time goes by, I'm learning more and more about the homeland, the continent on which The Bleeding Ground is set. Even so, I'm gathering a depth of knowledge about the specific region in which the story is taking place, but when it comes to the wider world, that knowledge isn't quite as fleshed out. Luckily, right now it doesn't need to be, and by the time it becomes crucial, I'm sure I'll have figured it out. Perfectionism is my other biggest weakness. I'm guilty of always thinking my work could be better. Sometimes I have to force myself to leave a section behind because if I don't, I will keep tinkering with it even though I don't need to. I also struggle with the actual structure of my writing. I've never been the strongest when it comes to grammar, and at this point it's been over a decade since I saw physical writing. When it comes to technical aspects like punctuation and structure in a sentence, I know that I could improve, but it's difficult because I struggle to visualise physical writing and I can't refresh myself on how it works by going and reading like a lot of authors would. That's the upside to narrating most of my work as opposed to publishing it in a physical format. It's not that my writing isn't well crafted, it's just that visually it might not look it on the page, if that makes sense. That's why I was so grateful to Pax Panic for helping me with Dishonored in Death. I knew that I'd done a good job with the story, but I needed a bit of help and guidance to make sure that the technical aspects were sound. Okay, time for the next question. Whose turn is it? Mine. What's your favourite and least favourite part of the writing process? Oh, that's an easy one. My least favourite part, by far, is starting a new project. From an authorial standpoint, there's nothing I find more intimidating than a blank document. To some people, that might scream potential. To me, it screams hard work. It's like standing at the peak of a mountain with a colossal boulder in front of me. I've just got to get it rolling, and once I do, it won't stop, but that's easier said than done. My favourite part is tinkering, or editing, whatever you want to call it. Chopping and changing, reworking and rephrasing, adding a line here, deleting one there. I just love sitting back and evaluating what I've done and then chipping away at the raw materials until I'm finally left with a piece that I'm proud of. What is your biggest distraction from your writing? I honestly don't think that I have one. At this point, writing isn't a hobby, it's an obsession, and I can't stop thinking about it even when I'm trying to sleep. I've always been the kind of guy to overanalyze the various forms of media I'm consuming, but these days I'm even worse because I'm just locked into creative mode. Books, TV, music, games, I can't switch off. I cannot be a casual observer because I'm just in too deep. I'd say that thinking about writing is my biggest distraction from actually writing. I just get sucked in and things that should take me 2 minutes take me far longer than they should. I'm writing a scene, but I need to introduce a new setting or a random side character. What should they be called? 2 hours later, I know every detail of that person's life and I haven't written a word. To be honest, now that I've been bitten by the world building bug, that's getting even worse. Right, shut up and move on, you've answered that one now. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made with your writing and what did you learn from it? Always have a backup document, because at some point you will fuck up and lose several thousand words of hard graft. I learnt that one the hard way. Also, don't rush into things. Make sure you consider the implications of what you're writing, because what you think is a clever piece of foreshadowing is actually you laying your cards on the table and signposting exactly where you're going. The audience will figure it out and there won't be a single shred of dramatic suspense left. This one almost bit me in the arse.
Puny mortal earthling. I demand to know your strategy when it comes to defeating the dreaded curse of writer's block.
Luckily, touch wood, I don't tend to get writer's block, or I do, but I don't think of it like that. As I said, the army of ideas is always clamouring for my attention, so when I reach the point in a project where I don't know what I want to do next, I just work on something else for a bit. Sometimes you just can't force inspiration, and you've got to focus your efforts elsewhere until it bubbles to the surface. How crucial is technology to your writing process? Pretty bloody vital, actually. Thank God for modern technology. As much as I'd love to use a typewriter or jot everything down in a notebook, that's just not possible. Both my writing and recording are done on a phone using Android's TalkBack screen reader, which is the only technology that seems to work for me. Everything else that I've tried to use, such as a tablet or a laptop, has been absolutely useless. A couple of years ago, I got a Chromebook because that was supposed to be the pinnacle of accessibility. Yeah, well, the learning curve was extremely steep and every time I tried to use it, it crashed. I ended up getting a phone with equal memory and processing power, which has been pretty reliable. Unfortunately, my mic, which connects via the charging port, drains the battery like a punctured paddling pool. My recording sessions are a race against time. How much can I get recorded versus how fast will my battery drain? To be honest, I'm just glad there's a lot of apps that are still inaccessible to me. If I could use something like World Anvil or Campfire Blaze, my obsession would be crippling. What are your biggest influences and inspirations? How have they shaped your writing? It's funny because, despite being an author, I'm heavily influenced by TV, and that's the medium that a lot of my favourite stories have been told in. The interesting thing is that these days I don't tend to watch TV shows that don't have audio description, which means every show I watch just feels like a high budget audiobook. To be honest, despite the fact that it's not always great, certain shows just don't work for me without audio description. I love Peaky Blinders, absolutely bloody love it, but I tried 3 separate times to watch it, and it wasn't until Netflix added audio description that I started to enjoy it as much as I do. Now, what I find kind of fascinating is when it comes to my all-time favourite TV shows, Wentworth, Bones, Peaky Blinders, The Walking Dead, Bates Motel, I've only watched one of them with audio description. Even though a few of them finished afterwards, for the most part I watched the other 4 before I lost the last of my sight, so I didn't need audio description back then, but I do think there's more to it than that. The Walking Dead is a unique case because I haven't enjoyed it as much since losing my sight, but I don't know how much of that is due to not being able to see versus the general declining quality of the show. One thing is for sure, despite that declining quality, if it had audio description, I would definitely enjoy it more. As for Wentworth, Bones and Bates Motel, they are intensely character-driven programs. For the most part, it's character development and dialogue that drives the plot. In the case of Bates Motel, the characters in that show are so well drawn that I sometimes forget that I didn't watch that show before becoming completely blind because I have such a strong mental image. Even with audio description, I don't tend to enjoy high-octane action sequences. I prefer that slow-paced intensity. The other day I started watching the final season of Peaky Blinders, and the first episode contained one of the best scenes I've ever watched. Tommy Shelby enters a pub, everything goes silent, and what follows is just expertly crafted dialogue. Wentworth is an Australian prison drama that is dripping with tension. It has characters that tend to move up and down on the moral spectrum to say the least, but they all have believable backstories and motivations, plus there's a lot of dialogue. Bones features one of my favourite tropes, smart people being good at their jobs. There's also the found family aspect to it, and guess what? Lots of dialogue! Shows like the ones that I've mentioned draw me in with the in-depth character development, and that means that when we do get the occasional action sequence, I'm invested because I care about what happens to the characters. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I don't enjoy action at all. I really love the first season of The Punisher, but I don't think that I would enjoy it as much without audio description. The climactic fight at the end of the series would be nowhere near as impactful if I didn't know what was going on and it was just grunts and smashing glass. All of those things, the focus on intensity and tension, character development and dialogue, have carried over into my writing. Those are the things that I enjoy whilst reading or watching TV, so they're the things that I focus on whilst writing. Maybe it doesn't matter, but when I'm working on a volume of The Bleeding Ground, I tend to think of it as an episode rather than a chapter, and that's the approach I take. Even the fact that I use music in The Bleeding Ground is influenced by my love of TV, because despite the fact I connect to things emotionally, books don't tend to make me cry, whereas the overall experience of a TV show does, quite often and quite easily. I don't want to because it feels like I'm being pretentious, but I'd also say I'm quite heavily influenced by Tolkien. I love a good scenery description, and I think that my love for the depth of Middle-earth is what drives me to get better at world building. What are your hopes and dreams for the future? My main hope is to just keep improving because I understand that I have potential and I just want to do my best to fulfill it. As for dreams, I've got a lot of big ideas that I know could come to fruition one day if I can just find a way to navigate the roadblocks I'm presented with and keep on going. I like the idea of taking on the role of a producer. I want to keep on being creative. I want to be somebody that puts out high quality audio entertainment, whether that's a full cast audiobook, an audio drama, or something else entirely. The possibilities are endless. I'd like to think that people will see me as an advocate for blind, visually impaired and otherwise disabled authors. I just want to raise awareness, push for accessibility, play some small part in changing the industry for the better, and maybe inspire some other authors to follow their passions. Honestly, that would make me really happy. Are you searching for any collaborations, beta readers, critique partners, or reviewers? If so, where can they find you? I recently joined a beta reading team and I've been really enjoying the process. I won't name names because I don't know if it's supposed to be common knowledge or not, but the author in question has been kind enough to send over audio files of them narrating each section. Trust me, if you haven't tried narrating your own work, it's hard. So I really appreciate that this author has gone to the effort of doing so to make sure that people like me can be involved in the project. I also had an author reach out and send me a review copy of their audiobook. I realised that it's incredibly difficult for indie authors to produce their own audiobooks, so I was pretty bloody pumped about that. Accessibility in regards to reading and writing is a topic that I'm becoming increasingly passionate about. Not to speak ill of those who don't, because believe me, I respect the hard work and dedication required to be an author, especially an indie author, but for obvious reasons, there's a special place in my heart for those who are producing their own audios. If you are one of those authors and you need a critique partner, a reviewer, a beta reader, or even just a friend, I'm your guy. Get in touch, yeah? In regards to my own writing, at the minute I'm not really in the position to be asking for reviewers because The Bleeding Ground is far from finished. However, receiving feedback always makes me happy and it's pretty useful, so if you were interested in being a beta reader or a critique partner and taking a look at the rough written version, which is essentially my narration script, I'd be happy to send each volume over before sitting down to record. That way, I wouldn't have to rely on ChatGPT, which isn't that reliable. I have to tell it that I'm a blind author, because if I don't, it picks up on every little technical mistake that I've made rather than focusing on the content and taking into account that it's an audiobook. But if I do, it assumes that all of my characters are blind. Slightly ableist, but it's a computer, so what are you gonna do? Don't worry though, The Bleeding Ground isn't my only project. I've got Average Steve's Big Day Off, which is a sci-fi comedy. I'm looking to tell more stories in the world Dishonored in Death is set in, and I'm always selecting new recruits from the army of ideas. Basically, if you've got any inquiries or you're interested in working with me in any way, whether it's author related, narration, voiceover work, or just a general YouTube collaboration, I'm open to a discussion to see if we can make it work. So, get in touch, masonad.author@gmail.com, and if you're not sure how to spell that, I'll stick it in the description. Right then, that's that, because I'm assuming that this has been a long video. When we were in high school, my friend Brad snorted chili powder because we thought that it would be hilarious. It was, for us, but for him it was pain. So my question of the day is this. What's the craziest, stupidest thing that you've ever done for a laugh? Have you enjoyed this video? If so, the like and subscribe buttons are just sitting there, waiting to be pressed. And if you don't press at least one of them, the next time you bite into a tasty treat, it'll be filled with that nasty gunge people get dunked into on kids' TV shows. Ugh, gross. If you've got thoughts to share, or you fancy a chat, then you know where the comment section is, and you can find the links to all my social media in the description. Thanks ever so much for spending time with me today, guys. Until next time, take care. For now, I'm off, and you should have a good one.